How do we judge if architecture is good or not? And what I mean by that is if you're a student getting design critiques or getting desk crits, whatever it is, or even someone who's actually designing the work along the way, how do you, as you're designing something, how do you judge and how do you try to help yourself understand if it's good or not? Or how do we take feedback from critics when we get it along the way? And I've been talking before about how, I feel like architecture is closer to law than either science or art. And this is a little bit similar because what we're doing is we're making our arguments for what we're trying to do, like the reason why, and then how we're actually executing it through architecture or whatever design medium that we have. And I think it's important because as Ada Louise Huxtable, the famous New York Times critic, is talking about, architecture is a comprised art. It has restraints, controls, conflicts that are not prevalent in other arts that are much more unencumbered. And so, what we want to get past is if people are just looking at your work, giving it a sort of thumbs up, I like it, or thumbs down, I don't like it. What you're really trying to do is ask a question and then have a solution and then talk about, is it doing what you're saying you want it to do? Is it connecting those dots? We can see what it looks like on the wall or on the screen. You don't need to tell us that it's a circle if it's a circle. I can see that. What I'm curious about is what are you trying to do? And then is the thing we're looking at doing the thing that you're trying to do? We can talk about, is the goal or is the thing you're trying to do, is that the right reason? And then we can talk about, is the thing at the end doing it? But that gap, that's really what critique is, in my opinion, because, the more interesting of a question you're asking yourself, the more interesting of a solution you're going to come up with. And so if you're just not pushing yourself to ask an interesting question, then your solution is probably not going to have much depth to it and much interest to it. And so that's why, when you're presenting your work, the thing that I always push people to do, and this is what I do in my own work as well, is what is the question we're trying to answer in the design? How did we come up with a design that's answering that question? And then we can have a discussion about how successfully our attempt is answering that series of questions or those arguments at the beginning. And so when I have students do presentations, this is very similar to the way that I present with clients. I don't talk about the form or the shape of the building because it's entirely subjective. What I'm trying to do is have people look at the layers that are deeper than that so that we can talk about what's the problem, what are we trying to achieve, what are the constraints, what are the opportunities, and then finally, how did we actually solve this problem? And if we can be convincing and believable and consistent, then the resulting thing, the way it looks, is almost an inevitability in a way. It's not that it's a formula. And again, I've said it's not a scientific process, but you're building up layers and you're sort of walking your way through so that the solution you're presenting actually is a good solution for the problem that you're solving. And then we can have a discussion about, do we want to paint it blue or brown or green or whatever? And part of the reason why this is important is that this allows you this way of thinking about breaking it out into sort of ideas that are then executed through design. What that helps you with is being a critic of yourself along the way. Because if you can be a critic of your own work, sort of stepping back, almost like looking over your own shoulder from a distance, if you can sort of blur your eyes when you look at your own work, so it's not as personal, because that's the hardest part, is that it's so personal, the work that you do as a designer, but in reality, it's within this context of this whole other, history of precedent that we work with when we're in design and architecture. And so, when I'm a critic and when I'm looking at my own work, the questions I'm asking are the same, which is, are the project's goals reasonable and believable enough? Is the project doing what I'm saying I want it to do? And then, how does it relate to other projects historically? And sort of how does it fit into today's discourse? And so we're not saying that, you're unaware of what else is going on, but the more you can present your project in those terms and not just what it looks like, which again, I feel like is never the right way to go, because then you're just talking about something being pretty or not, or I like it. That's not whether you're talking about a person or a building, like that shouldn't be the first thing we're looking at is, do I like it or not? Like, do I like the way it looks or not? That's just a very shallow way of evaluating things. And so I'm trying to offer a way of helping people understand at least the way I think about it, which is the questions being asked, the thing that you actually are producing, and then that gap in between, that's what we're trying to connect and make it as good as possible. And it's not that the idea of beauty doesn't matter. The Buckminster Fuller quote that I like a lot is, when I'm working on a problem, I never think about beauty, but when it's finished, if the solution isn't beautiful, I know it's wrong. And what I like about that is that he's talking about how, yes, he wants it to be beautiful. Yes, you're trying to convince somebody and really sort of sell someone on the work that you're doing, that yes, this is a good solution here. But what he's also saying is that that's not where you start. That's sort of the very last thing that we consider. And inherently, as you build things up through a series of arguments, solving different problems through your design, it starts to feel like the right solution because it's doing so many good things. And so, regardless of all of that, if that's the way we sort of do our work and think about even critiquing our own work or critiquing other people's work in a way that isn't just your opinion, but sort of a more dispassionate way of looking at your own work and other people's work, then when other people are looking at your work, what's important to remember is that it may or may not be someone that you actually put a lot of weight in. When you go to a jury, when you're being critiqued either as a desk crit by a friend or, in a more open forum like a project jury, they may have had a bad day. They may have woken up on the wrong side of the bed. They may have gotten a speeding ticket on the way over. They may have gotten dumped the night before. Whatever it is, they may just be in a bad mood. They might not like circles and you've got a circle on the wall. Like, whatever it is, as a critic on my side, I would always know a lot more than just, the comments in a jury are almost secondary because, I would watch students all semester develop. You would know who would sort of just show up at the last minute with all this stuff versus people who'd been like really working on it and developing it. And that doesn't necessarily correlate to a good or a bad review. We've all seen people who, you see them show up with something at the last minute and it's like, wow, this is nice, but where did it come from? And so, school and work are different in that way where it's not just about that final result in a lot of ways, but you know, don't worry about the actual review as much as the way that you feel about your work, because it's your work that you're going to be carrying forward as you move along in your career and as you continue to show it to, future employers or whatever the case might be. So, understanding what is good critique, where it comes from, and then also just not putting too much weight in any one critique because you're the one whose work it is. And just keep that in mind as you go forward, because sometimes people take this stuff like gospel and it just isn't. So, take it as it comes. Good luck with everything. And if this is helpful, please like the videos and subscribe to the channel because that's the best way to show me that this is helping. Thank you very much.